Putin crossed Romania's red line, the retaliation was brutal at first glance. The objects drifting on the Black Sea looked almost too small to matter. No missile plume, no fighter jet, no warship racing toward the Romanian coast, just two unmanned aircraft, floating near one of the most strategically important energy projects in southeastern Europe. But that quiet scene near Romania's Neptune Deep gas development carried a message far bigger than the drones themselves. A civilian vessel spotted them. Romanian forces moved in. Explosive ordnance divers examined the threat. And then Romania destroyed both drones in controlled detonations. The aircraft were Gerbera-type systems, a design widely associated with Russia's drone warfare. But Romanian officials did not publicly establish their origin. Ukraine said they were not Ukrainian. That uncertainty matters. Because the real story is not that Bucharest proved Moscow had deliberately targeted Neptune Deep. The real story is that Romania has reached the point where unidentified military drones appearing beside critical energy infrastructure are no longer treated as debris to be observed. They are treated as threats to be eliminated. And this is where the headline becomes more serious than it first sounds. Romania's retaliation was not a theatrical strike on Russian territory. It was something strategically more dangerous for Moscow, a change in behavior. For years, countries on NATO's eastern edge tried to manage spillover from the Ukraine war with warnings, diplomatic protests, fighter scrambles, and carefully worded condemnations. Romania is now demonstrating a different rule. If an armed or potentially dangerous unmanned system enters the wrong space, approaches critical infrastructure, or creates an immediate hazard, Romanian forces are increasingly prepared to physically remove it. That means the battlefield around Ukraine is no longer defined only by where Russian and Ukrainian forces are shooting. It is being defined by what neighboring states are willing to destroy. Once that threshold changes, every future drone incident becomes a test. And the next test may happen faster than politicians have time to hold a meeting. The sequence that pushed Romania to this point did not begin offshore. It began over homes. On the night of May 28 into May 29, a Russian drone crossed into Romanian airspace during an attack on neighboring Ukraine and struck an apartment block in Galai. A woman and a child were injured. Romanian F-16s had been scrambled, but the low-flying drone reached a populated area before it could be stopped. NATO condemned the incident, and the alliance again emphasized that Romanian territory is NATO territory. The psychological effect was enormous. Before Galai, drone incursions could still be discussed as fragments, navigation errors, border spillover, and the uncomfortable byproduct of a neighboring war. After a Russian drone exploded on an apartment building and injured civilians, that vocabulary became much harder to defend. Romania was not debating an abstract risk anymore. The war had physically touched a residential building inside NATO. Then came the next shift. In late July, Romanian F-16s began shooting intruding drones down. According to reporting on the incidents, Romania destroyed 3 Russian origin drones over 3 days, marking a major departure from years of restraint. The political message was unmistakable. Bucharest still did not want a war with Russia, but it was no longer willing to make fear of escalation the organizing principle of its air defense. That distinction is critical. Deterrence collapses when one side believes the other is so terrified of escalation that it will tolerate endless small violations. Romania appears to be trying to reverse that calculation. Instead of asking only, could shooting this drone escalate the situation? Bucharest is increasingly forced to ask the opposite question: what happens if we never shoot? Now place the Neptune Deep incident into that timeline. The project is not just another offshore installation. Its production platform was installed in July, and gas production is scheduled to begin in 2027. The development is expected to strengthen Romanian and regional energy security and could make Romania the European Union's largest gas producer. The offshore platform, pipelines, subsea infrastructure, and support vessels therefore sit at the intersection of economics, national security, and European energy strategy. A drone drifting nearby does not need to detonate to create a strategic crisis. It can force shutdowns, trigger security zones, frighten commercial operators, raise insurance costs, test surveillance gaps, and reveal response times. Even an unarmed decoy can collect something valuable, information about how quickly defenders react and what assets they deploy. That is why Romania's decision to destroy the two drones matters far beyond the cost of the aircraft. And this is where Russia faces a problem. The Kremlin's advantage in the gray zone has always depended on ambiguity. A drone crosses a border. Was it intentional? GPS interference moves a system off course. Was it jamming, malfunction, or deliberate routing? Debris lands near infrastructure. Was it the result of an interception? A suspicious device appears near a military logistics hub. Who launched it? Hybrid pressure works because attribution is slower than action. Governments need evidence. Militaries need rules. Alliances need consultation. The provocateur needs only confusion. But Romania's emerging posture reduces the value of that ambiguity. Bucharest does not have to prove who owns a dangerous drone before neutralizing an immediate threat in its own security environment. It can destroy first for safety, investigate afterward, and still avoid claiming more than the evidence supports. That is a much harder operating environment for anyone trying to exploit hesitation. It also creates a dilemma for Moscow. If Russian systems genuinely cross into Romania, the chances of losing them are rising. If Russian electronic warfare pushes Ukrainian systems off course, Romania may still destroy them. If unidentified drones appear near Romanian infrastructure, they may be eliminated before anyone can use their ambiguity for political leverage. In other words, the gray zone becomes less gray when the defender's rule is simple: unidentified does not mean untouchable. That is not an attack on Russia. It is denial. And denial can be brutal because it strips away cheap options one by one. A low-cost, unmanned platform can no longer assume that NATO states will watch it, photograph it, and complain after it falls. The response chain is moving closer to detect, classify, engage. But there is another reason this matters. Romania is not acting alone in an empty sea. In the Black Sea, Romania, Bulgaria, and Turkey have already been working together against drifting mines, clearing more than 150 of them, and in July they agreed to expand cooperation toward protecting critical infrastructure. This is a quiet but important evolution. Mine clearance sounds defensive and technical. Infrastructure protection is broader. It means the three NATO states ringing much of the western and southern Black Sea are treating energy platforms, shipping routes, and maritime networks as part of the security architecture of the war's perimeter. The Black Sea is no longer simply the water between Ukraine, Russia, and Turkey. It is becoming an operational security zone where commercial energy, military surveillance, and alliance deterrence increasingly overlap. That does not mean every drone found in the region is Russian. In fact, one of the most important incidents of early August proves why disciplined attribution is essential. On August 8, a drone crossed from Romania into Bulgaria and exploded near the village of Kardam, close to Trans-Balkan gas pipeline infrastructure. Bulgarian authorities said the aircraft was likely a Ukrainian Maya decoy and found no indication that the event had been intentional. That incident destroys the simplistic narrative that every aerial violation near NATO's eastern border is automatically a Russian attack. But it also strengthens the larger argument. The region is saturated with unmanned systems, electronic warfare, decoys, long-range strikes, and navigation uncertainty. Whether a specific machine is Russian, Ukrainian, or unidentified, NATO governments now have to defend their territory against the physical consequences of a war that does not respect neat lines on a map. And south of Ukraine, Moldova is living with the same problem under even more difficult conditions. Moldova is not a NATO member. It is constitutionally neutral. Its air defense capacity has historically been limited. Yet the country has repeatedly dealt with drones crossing its territory or debris falling near communities. In March, President Maia Sandu condemned the discovery of an explosive carrying Russian drone in the southeast as a serious violation of Moldovan airspace. In July, Moldova's foreign ministry again condemned a Russian Geran 2 overflight that ended with the drone exploding near Kopanka. By June, Sandu was openly arguing that Moldova needed high-technology interceptor drones and legal changes to help build that capability. The significance is easy to miss. A small neutral state that once had almost no realistic ability to contest these systems is now discussing how to manufacture, acquire, and legally employ the tools to stop them. The European Union is helping accelerate that transformation. In July, the EU pledged €120 million to strengthen Moldova's air defense system. That is not enough to turn Moldova into a heavily defended airspace overnight, but it changes the trajectory. Every radar delivered, every interceptor purchased, every command network modernized, and every unit trained increases the cost of future violations. Moscow has spent years benefiting from the military weakness of states between Russia and the European Union. But the war in Ukraine is producing the opposite strategic effect from the one the Kremlin wanted. Countries that once spent little on defense are buying radars, neutral states are debating interceptors. NATO members are rewriting engagement procedures. Infrastructure that was treated as commercial is being guarded as strategic. Russia's pressure is not dissolving the eastern flank, it is hardening it. Now look at NATO's broader posture. The alliance says it has reinforced its eastern flank with multinational forces, integrated air and missile defense, air policing, and the Eastern Sentry activity launched after a wave of Russian airspace violations in 2025. Romania hosts a French-led NATO Forward Land Forces battle group. Allied aircraft operate alongside Romanian fighters. NATO's counter-drone work has also become more practical. In April 2026, Romania hosted a major NATO counter-UAS experimentation event at Capu Media, where hundreds of personnel and more than 200 technical systems were brought together to test detection, command and control, and defeat mechanisms against drone threats. This matters because the defense against drones is no longer a niche military problem. It is becoming one of the central questions of European security. How do you stop something cheap, low, slow, and ambiguous without spending an enormously expensive interceptor every time it appears? Romania is becoming a laboratory for that answer, because geography gives it no choice. The Danube Delta sits beside southern Ukraine. The Black Sea coast faces a battlespace crowded with missiles, drones, naval unmanned systems, and electronic warfare. Constanta is both a commercial hub and a strategic logistics point. Neptune Deep is emerging as a major energy asset. NATO forces are present. Ukrainian ports across the border are frequent Russian targets. Every Russian strike package launched toward Odessa or the Danube ports creates the possibility of spillover. Every Ukrainian counterstrike into the Black Sea creates its own navigation and debris risks. Romania therefore has to build a defense system capable of reacting in seconds while political leaders calculate in hours. That gap between tactical speed and diplomatic caution is where accidents become crises. And that is exactly why Putin's red line strategy is becoming dangerous for Russia as well. The Kremlin has repeatedly relied on controlled pressure. Push, observe, deny, repeat. The objective is not always to trigger a war. Often it is to learn where the boundary actually is. How close can a drone fly before fighters engage? How long does radar track it? Will a NATO country fire if the drone is heading back toward Ukraine? Will politicians hesitate if civilians are below? Will allies agree on attribution? Will one government react differently from another? Every unanswered incursion can become data. But once Romania starts shooting, the experiment changes. The question is no longer whether Romania will tolerate a violation. The question becomes how aggressively it will intercept the next one. That shift has consequences for Russian mission planning near the Danube and Western Black Sea. Operators have to account for a growing engagement envelope. Flight routes that once exploited border geometry may carry greater risk. Decoys that drift too far west may be lost. Electronic warfare effects that produce unpredictable navigation can create diplomatic problems. And if a Russian drone is shot down inside Romania, Moscow must decide whether to ignore the loss, protest, retaliate asymmetrically, or attempt to punish the interceptor network. Each option carries costs. Ignore too many losses and deterrence weakens. Escalate directly against Romania and Russia confronts NATO. Retaliate covertly and attribution becomes the next battlefield. This is why the new Romanian posture is more consequential than a dramatic one-off strike. It forces Moscow to make harder choices every single time. The pressure is spreading beyond Romania. Germany's Leipzig/Halle airport. A major freight hub with NATO logistical significance became the center of a counterterrorism investigation after a drone equipped with professional explosives was discovered there in early August. German authorities did not publicly establish who was responsible. Some lawmakers suspected Russian involvement. Moscow rejected the insinuations and called the affair a provocation. The key point is not to pretend the case is solved. It is that European security services are now treating drone incidents around logistics infrastructure with a level of seriousness once reserved for conventional sabotage. Germany's interior minister has warned that the country faces daily hybrid threats while anti-drone capabilities are being expanded. The war's shadow is no longer confined to trenches in eastern Ukraine. It is appearing around airports, pipelines, ports, and power systems across Europe. At the same time, Poland and the Baltic states have tightened protection around critical infrastructure amid intelligence concerns about possible sabotage or false flag scenarios. Lithuania has warned that captured Ukrainian drones could potentially be used in provocations designed to create confusion inside NATO. Russia rejects those claims. Again, attribution is the center of the contest. Imagine the strategic value of a drone that looks Ukrainian striking a NATO facility during a moment of high tension. The weapon does not need to destroy much. It needs to create doubt. Was it Ukraine? Russia? A criminal group? An accident? How quickly does NATO respond? Does public opinion fracture before investigators finish their work? Hybrid operations seek political damage disproportionate to physical damage. That is why Eastern European governments are guarding infrastructure before they have proof of a specific incoming attack. Romania's approach offers one answer to this ambiguity: separate immediate defense from final attribution. If something is threatening a gas platform, neutralize the threat. If a drone violates controlled airspace, intercept it under established rules. If debris creates a danger to shipping, destroy it safely. Then investigate who sent it. That sequence sounds obvious, but politically it is a major change. For years, fear of misidentification created hesitation. Now the region is moving toward a model where tactical defense does not require instant geopolitical certainty. The consequence is that the burden shifts. The operator of the drone, not the defender, takes the risk of miscalculation. This is the retaliation the headline is really pointing toward. Not a Romanian missile strike on Sevastopol, not NATO aircraft bombing Russian bases, not a declaration of war. The retaliation is the destruction of the permissive environment Moscow's war has exploited. Romania is turning its airspace and maritime approaches from a warning zone into an engagement zone. Moldova is trying to build interceptors. NATO is integrating counter-UAS systems. Bulgaria is reinforcing detection near vulnerable infrastructure. Poland and the Baltics are guarding energy and transport networks. Germany is expanding anti-drone defenses. None of these steps by itself looks brutal. Together, they are brutal to a strategy based on cheap pressure, deniable intrusions and hesitation. And there is a dangerous paradox here. Stronger defense can deter aggression, but it can also create more moments where a tactical decision carries strategic consequences. A Romanian F-16 pilot may have seconds to decide whether a drone is heading toward a city. A naval commander may have minutes to decide whether an unidentified unmanned craft approaching an offshore platform is a weapon. An air defense operator may not know whether GPS interference has pushed the vehicle off course. Political leaders may only learn about the engagement after the target has already been destroyed. The more crowded the Black Sea battlespace becomes, the greater the risk that one side interprets a defensive action as an offensive signal. Deterrence depends on credibility, but crisis stability depends on communication. Europe now needs both at the same time. So what happens next? The most likely scenario is not a sudden NATO-Russia war. It is a steady increase in interceptions. More radars, more electronic warfare, more interceptor drones, more fighters launched from Romanian bases, more naval patrols around infrastructure, more legal authority for commanders to act quickly, and more arguments over attribution after every explosion. The contest will be fought in the space between peace and war, where nobody wants to cross the final threshold but everyone is trying to dominate the steps immediately below it. For Putin, that space is getting narrower. A Russian drone crossing Romania can now be shot down. An unidentified drone drifting beside a strategic gas project can be destroyed. Moldova is no longer content to remain defenseless. NATO's eastern flank is testing layered counter-drone systems specifically designed for the low-cost threats that once slipped through traditional air defense thinking. Critical infrastructure across Europe is being treated as part of the battle space. The old assumption that small violations would trigger big debates but limited physical responses is breaking down. And that may be the real red line Romania has drawn. The line is not a sentence in a speech. It is not a diplomatic note. It is not even a map coordinate. The line is a new default behavior if the war enters Romanian space in a form that threatens Romanian people, airspace, shipping, or infrastructure. Romania is increasingly prepared to remove the threat physically. That is a far more credible red line because it does not depend on rhetoric. It depends on action. The danger for Moscow is that once one frontline state proves this model can work without immediately triggering World War III, others may follow. A drone is intercepted. Russia protests. Nothing larger happens. Another is destroyed. Again, the alliance holds. Each successful defensive engagement normalizes the next one. What once looked escalatory becomes routine, and routine is the enemy of intimidation. A threat loses power when the target stops being shocked by it. But there is danger for NATO too. Confidence can become overconfidence. Not every drone is Russian. Not every incursion is deliberate. The Bulgarian incident is a reminder that Ukrainian systems can also stray across borders. Electronic warfare can distort routes. Mechanical failure can turn a weapon into a geopolitical mystery. That is why the smartest version of Romania's tougher posture is not shoot anything that moves. It is layered detection, rapid identification, proportional engagement, and disciplined public attribution. Destroy the threat when necessary. Do not invent certainty afterward. That balance hard defense, careful attribution, may decide whether the Black Sea becomes more stable or far more explosive. Romania has clearly lost patience with being treated as a passive spectator to a war touching its border. Moldova is trying to ensure it is not permanently defenseless. NATO is reinforcing the eastern flank. Europe is hardening airports, pipelines, energy platforms, and transport networks. And Russia now has to operate in an environment where the cost of every ambiguous move is rising. So the brutal retaliation was not one explosion in the Black Sea. It was the collapse of hesitation. Romania has shown that drones can be destroyed. NATO has shown that the eastern flank can be reinforced. Moldova has shown that neutrality does not mean accepting vulnerability. Germany, Poland, and the Baltic states are showing that infrastructure can no longer be separated from national defense. And the message forming across Europe is increasingly difficult for Moscow to ignore. The era of endless testing without physical consequences is ending. The next drone that crosses the line may discover that before the politicians even have time to argue about who sent it.